As we continue on our journey through Advent and through this idea of travelling through the Advent, I do need to confirm, Mark and I are on no commission. There are other organisations and supermarkets available for you to shop in over Christmas. We should have thought about it, we should have been on commission, that would be brilliant, but we aren't. But one of the wonders, as we've put this series together for me, has been, as I've watched more adverts than is healthy, they cannot distance themselves from the Christmas story. I don't know if you've noticed it, but when you watch these adverts, there are a few, I will give you that draw on our desire for bigger and better and more. But it seems that it's very difficult for humanity to drag itself away from that first Christmas. Adverts that have stories of joy, of community, of giving, of love and patience. It's funny, the more you spend time in the adverts, the more you realise there is an undercurrent of something we would recognise as that first Christmas running through them. From finding the perfect gift for someone to finding people to share the wonder of Christmas with. At its root and in its outworking, there is something about that first Christmas that draws people in, draws them into this nativity scene that we are going to touch on as we go through our service. So I'm going to invite Jill, if she would, to come and begin to set the scene for us. Thank you for starting our nativity scene for us. And we're going to move back into our adverts, and this, our third Sunday, we are going beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. We are going to Germany and to watch an advert that was produced by a Dutch company, which makes perfect sense. And unbelievably, this advert first aired in 2022. It's racked up over 5 million views online. You'll understand why once you've seen it. And so we're going to watch this 2022 advert from Doc Morris. a tearjerker, nice and early in the service for you all to appreciate. An incredible advert, I think you'd all agree. Hands up if anyone had seen it before. A few people watch German TV. I saw it when I made him cry in the office. It's incredible how much is communicated over 120 seconds with so little said. An incredibly powerful image. It stirs emotion, draws us in, leaves us confused, and ultimately leaves us with that incredible sense of satisfaction and joy. It's almost as if they are drawing inspiration from that first Christmas, that nativity scene that can leave us confused, emotionally stirred, and ultimately left with a sense of satisfaction and joy. So I'm going to invite Joel to come and place our second figure into the nativity scene for us. Thank you, Joel. I'm going to use this advert as a starting point for us this morning, beginning with this question. What motivates you? What motivates you? It's a rhetorical question, don't panic. But I wonder what motivates you, because during this advert, we see time and time again reference the back of a photo frame. For the first time you watch it, you have no idea what it is that this gentleman is inspired by, what motivates him to try and get fit and strong and healthy. The driving force behind those early mornings, the cold weather runs and the relentless lifting is that picture in that frame. But I wonder for you, what is it that motivates you? Because we read this in Matthew 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." What is it that motivates you? What was it that motivated wise men from the east to travel to see the newborn king? Me and Mark had a discussion about this. I wanted to check that I wasn't going to be heretical this morning. But this is where this story gets particularly good. And for a story where Jesus is born, for this bit to be good, suggests that it's pretty good. So work with me here. These wise men are not Jewish. They were not Jewish. Therefore, they hadn't been taught about the scriptures. So we can rule that out as a motivation. They also weren't Hebrews who would have had access to teachings and scripture and other things. So we can rule out that as a motivation. So there is no upbringing, there is no cultural reference for them to be following the star. So what motivates three very intelligent people to travel that far following a star? Now, we know they'd studied the stars, but why was it this star? What was it about this star to a culture that was different, that meant so much? Well, we can pick up a line of thinking that brings these wise men to a line of descendancy from the wise men of the Old Testament. Back then, they would have been referred to as magicians and other names, but there is a thinking that they joined the story back with Daniel. In Daniel 2, we read this. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me and I want to know what it means." The astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it." Could it be that this story and the faith that Daniel showed started a line of motivation and of thinking and of curiosity in the wise men that led all the way to the stable? What was it that motivated three intelligent individuals to travel following a star? Could it possibly be the faith of Daniel? Following the star, motivated by a desire to see this king, motivated to understand what it was that was happening, to try and put together some of the pieces that they'd heard from Daniel's life. Ultimately, their motivation, whatever it might have been at its core to follow this star, was to be a part of this. To be a part of what was happening that night in the stable. Even by Gareth to come and continue to build the scene for it. A picture in a frame driving an old man to lifting weights. A star in the sky, stories of a man whose faith allowed him to sleep with lions. I wonder what it is that motivates you. What is it that draws you closer to God? What is it that gets you up in the morning to be a part of church? To spend time reading your Bible, praying? I also wonder what it is that motivates you that outweighs the opposition and the opinion of others. What is it that tips the balance in that motivation? I love the old lady in that advert. I think she is brilliant. I worryingly see more of myself in her than maybe any other character, but it's that look on her face every time the camera cuts to her of pity. You know in her head she's thinking, the silly old fool. But that's what she's thinking. And she looks on this gentleman and he has a choice to make. Will her opinion, will her view of him detract from what he's doing? Is his motivation strong enough to stand up to the opposition that he's facing? That subtle underlying look of pity and disdain that she shows him. Then his daughter comes along, wondering what he is up to, worrying no doubt about his health and his well-being. Opposition is standing against him. Does his motivation stack up against that? That's the question he's left with. The question we're left with is, how do we cope with the opinions of others? How do we cope? This is an important season for us. For generations, we've watched it become commercialized, all the other complaints that we may well have about it, but it's an important season for us. How do we stand up against some of the opposition we face? How do we cope? It can be hard. Stand strong in your faith when you're faced with adversity, with mockery, with that look of pity on people's faces when they find out you're getting up early to go to church on Christmas morning. It's hard. But we read again this story of Daniel, and I believe it plays a huge part in the motivation for the wise men to be a part of that Christmas scene because of the way he lived his life in the face of adversity. Please listen as I read. Now, Daniel so distinguished himself amongst the administrators and satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and satraps tried to find grounds to charge against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and had neither corruption nor negligence. Finally, these men said, we will never find a basis for charges against this man Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So the administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, may King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repelled. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went to his home, to his upstairs room, where the window opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. The result of this action, of this prayer time, was the catalyst for Daniel spending an evening in the company of lions. That choice that he makes there, that deliberate decision to be faithful to God, should have cost him his life. That's the truth of the story. Instead of fearing man, instead of bowing to the pressures of the world, instead of looking at the mockery and the stand against who he was and all that he was doing, he stood firm in his faith. His motivation was God, not man. I find it crazy to consider that this moment, this defining moment in Daniel's story, somehow weaves its way in a way that only God can into motivating three wise men to travel from the east to see Jesus. That the faith that Daniel showed at this moment started a line of activity, of curiosity, of drive that would make them travel to follow a star. What is it about this God that Daniel follows that would make him stand in the den with lions? You can almost imagine the generations passing on the story of Daniel. Were you there when Nebuchadnezzar had the dream? Was it your great-granddad? Who's this Daniel? Did he really sleep with lions? You can just imagine the story traveling and this curiosity about who is this God. I want you to think for a moment. Have you ever considered how your faith looks to others? How does your faith look to those who maybe mock you, look on you with pity, stand against you, deliberately disagree with you, look to antagonize you, whatever it might be? Have you ever considered what your faith might look like to them? Because Daniel's faith looks different to how they expected. And Daniel's faith ultimately allowed God to come in and create this amazing moment where he spends the evening with the lions. I wonder if your faith in the way you stand up against that mockery could inspire future generations to search out the King of Kings, as we believe Daniel's did. How does your faith inspire others? What role does it play in the journey others go on? The wise men, of course, faced their own collection of challenges. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them exactly the time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go and worship him too." Of course, after their encounter, we read this: "And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." How do you cope with the opinion of others? How do you cope? How do the opinions of others affect your actions and your motivation? This was a king that these wise men deliberately defied because of a dream. Deliberately defied a king who we understand to be savage because of a dream, because of an encounter they had with God, inspired by the faith of someone else. I wonder if you were placed back then on that first Christmas, would the voices of those around you have stopped you being drawn to the stable to see the scene? Would the opinions of others, would the way you feel within the world, would your faith and motivation have been greater than that of the opinions of others? Would you have found yourself here? I'm going to ask Pip, Jane, and Sharon to come and place our wise men for us in the scene. Thank you. It's amazing, isn't it? In that advert, we see the man doing his lifting in the shed. I don't know if you picked up on it, but there is children playing almost continually throughout the advert. And yet in that winter scene, we see them imitating him, copying him, pretending to lift their own weights. They are inspired by his actions, so much so that they copy him. The wise men, quite possibly inspired by the stories they were told of a boy who refused to eat the king's food, interpreted his dreams and hung out for the night with lions, came to see Jesus. It's amazing, isn't it? If you stop to think about it, how God weaves things together. How he's at work in all things. How the actions of others have played a part in your own faith journey. I wonder if you would recall, who was it that invited you to something that first time? Who was it that you looked upon and went, you know what, there is something about the way they do life that I'm curious about, that inspires me. Someone somewhere has played a part in your journey. They've invested in you. They've invited you. They've done something to show love that has made you begin this journey to faith. Someone, I believe, would have modeled what it was to follow Christ to you, to help you begin that journey. Who is there you can inspire? Who is there you can inspire? You can model discipleship to. Who is there that's watching the way you conduct your life? Who is there that's looking at this Christmas going, you know what, every single year this boring person goes to multiple church services and they get up early on Christmas morning and it makes no sense. Why are they not opening presents, listening to the King's speech, eating loads of food and falling asleep all afternoon? Why is there something else going on? Is this the year where they go, you know what, can I come? Can I see why you do what you do? Who is there that your faith journey can inspire? Often it's those little, simple, quiet, humble acts of faith that will speak the loudest. It's funny, isn't it? Daniel doesn't defy the king by going into the middle of the market and praying to God. I don't know if you noticed in that last line, he went and did as he'd always done. His faithfulness didn't change in the face of adversity. In fact, it quite simply just held him safe during. Those little, simple, quiet, humble acts of faith, of love, of kindness, of hospitality, of generosity, of patience, that bring a wondering world a glimpse of who God is and how he is at work through his people. That's what we're called to do. That's how we are called to inspire others. So I begin to bring us to a close. We're going to watch that advert again. I may even try and watch the whole thing this time rather than look away. But just watch it. See the way that it inspires the kids, the look of it. And how I find it very difficult to believe at its heart there isn't something of that first Christmas being played out. every action intentional. Every alarm set with a purpose, every lift, every step, every act deliberately geared towards a journey towards that Christmas day. To the gift of a star to a loved granddaughter. And I wonder if you'd come and complete our nativity scene for us, please. Every action intentional, every dawn and every sunset. A Roman census, angelic announcements, a star in the sky, every act deliberate on the journey to Emmanuel. Yes. To the gift of Jesus given to a loved world. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son,